So I think if I asked any of you, actually, I know, if I asked you what validity means or validation means or to be valid or validate, you would be able to answer that in its most simplest way. Because in the last semester in the HRIS course, HRM 722, we actually covered the idea of validity. And now some of you have dealt with validity and reliability if you took a statistics course or you did something like psychology and you had to do a paper and demonstrate validity. And that's fine. Look, if you never took those courses before, it's okay. If you never took statistics before, or you're not in a science program in your undergrad, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to take the approach of day 1, day 2, week 5, and year 5. I mean, literally, any point in time in recruitment and selection within an HR department. So if you do choose, you might go into your first job and say, I just want to kind of dabble in a little bit of this and that, kind of generalist. That's fine. One of the first popular things your boss is going to ask you to do is participate in the recruitment process, partly because it's an entry-level thing, and also maybe the selection process, and you'll learn from it. That's okay, that's fine. Remember what I told you, if you can't get the right people into your organization, then everything else hurts. Everything else does not really make sense then. So it is a very important thing to do. So if you decide to specialize in this area and become really, really good at it, and remember my discussion on how to move it to talent management, make a lot more money, but make more sense out of it. Remember that. But even if you don't choose this as a career option, no worries. The stuff we're going to learn about validity and reliability can help pretty much in anything in HR. So let's go over some key concepts. Look, in its simplest way to think about it is that validity is simply checking to see if something was legitimate. Did it work? Didn't it work? Did it do what it needed to do? Did it achieve an outcome? And maybe by how much? Yes or no? Or to what degree? So if you validate something, says, yep, I did something, it did what I needed to do, the results are positive, so it's a yes, no, yes, it did. Or you can go further and say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, it achieved my results 8 out of 10, which means a really high score, a high kind of correlation between what you did, the cause, and the effect, the outcome. In its simplest way to validate is simply to check. And of course, we have a benchmark, right? So if you have a benchmark, a point that you're comparing against. So I'll give you an example. If you were going to spend, let's say, $100,000 on training, sure, I could spend the money, give the employees a training, hopefully you'll use some sort of control group, and I could say, hey, I gave the training, I'm good to go, done. Tell my boss I did the training, move on with life. But how would you really know if that investment was worthwhile? Should you keep doing it every year or with new employees? But if you said, look, I did the training, $100,000, and the training was all about customer service sensitivity, making your representatives better customer service people, then you would do a performance measure. You would look at their performance, measure customer sensitivity by way of, let's say, customer complaints or their satisfaction, whatever it might be. Now, if customer satisfaction improved, it doubled, you can totally say that the training had an impact. But if customer sensitivity or customer service went up by 25%, or fewer complaints, that's another way to look at it, then you've essentially validated. You just have to ask, is a 25% difference worth the money we're putting into training? And it's not just the money, it's the time and the effort and the resources. So in the simplest terms, that's to validate. Now I want you to think about personal things, personal ways that you validate. I mean, you might go out for, let's say, a workout or run. And at the end of the 1 or 2 mile run, I'm not sure if that's long or short, but let's just say 2 mile run, you might ask yourself, did I do okay? Did I do well? Yeah, you validated it. But if at the end you say, my God, that was just not worth it, I'm too tired, then you've invalidated it. You're not going to do it again. You get validated when you were younger when you go to a club that has alcohol. Validation is simply, are they over the age, yes or no? That's a validation. You got validated. You got carded. We're going to look at it from a whole different perspective. See, you can do recruitment selection in an informal way, and we discussed, look, I have to be honest, most recruiters that I've ever met, and I've been doing this for some time, they don't really go science on us. They do it just more from an intuitive, informal way. I've been doing this for all these years. It's working. Let's keep doing it. But when you start measuring what you did and measuring against a benchmark to see how well you did, essentially validate and achieve reliability if it happens over a period of time, now you're getting more into that scientific way, that more formal way. And again, if you want to get rid of the word scientific, it's okay. Just say a more structured, a more formal way. Now, I'll give you some perspective. I've had clients who are like mid to small size organizations that just don't. They just move on. They do recruitment selection, textbook style, the way it's always been. They don't really measure this stuff. They just did it. It worked. Okay, good. They don't want to know by how much it worked. But when you get into larger organizations, especially service firms like banks, consulting firms, law firms, accounting firms, they have more of an appetite, more of a tolerance, and a need, in fact, a demand to be more scientific or to be more formal. Prove to me that what you're doing is working. Now, in the HRIS course, we talked about several ways to do. I mean, you could do averages, medians, you could calculate all sorts of different correlation efficients, whatever you like. You want to hire a stats guy? Go ahead. Quite often, though, it's simply looking at what were the results in the past. Then I did something, let's say a new recruiting agency. What are the results now? And if you see an improvement from the past to today, there's your validation. Right? I mean, come on, you can take one number, deduct it from another, figure out the difference, right? High minus low divided by low is a percentage. Now, getting into recruitment and selection on the ground, quite often in most organizations, there are consultants who would go into a company. They would dive deep, so to speak, into the science behind validation and teach that organization, set things in place, in motion of how to measure metrics and how to continually look at the effectiveness of what you're doing, your activities. And then they walk away, and then the recruitment team, the selection team or talent management team would just continually do it. But I'll tell you from experience, this doesn't always work out that way. Quite often we just kind of say, yeah, we did it, it's good, and then go back to the old way of doing things. There has to be a demand from the top. It has to be part of your HR's culture to want to be more formal, to be more structured. Governments, I think, are ones who do this a lot by mandate. So let's have a look at some of this stuff. Validity measures how accurately a test score reflects the performance criteria to be assessed. That sounds a little bit technical, doesn't it? In simple terms, did you test people before you hired them? Okay, fine. After you hired them, did you see how well they're doing? Okay, match the two up. If you can prove the higher the test score, the higher the performance criteria, that's validity. Pure and simple. Did it, didn't it? And maybe by how much? Now use Excel. You can easily calculate the percentage difference. For example, if by giving an employment test and the score is high, then validity is achieved. If the new employee also performs well in the tested skill. So both have to be high. Now we're going to talk about the matchup. I mean, you can't just give a test of one kind and assess performance somewhere else. That would be like me giving you a test on something really not related to the course. I mean, wouldn't it be cool? You guys want me to give you a test in this recruitment selection course for the training course I teach? No, that would not be right. It would not be fair. In fact, it happens all the time. It becomes systemic. There's some organizations that just do some really weird stuff, and employees sit back and take it until somebody comes around and says, wait, this is not right. And it becomes a legal issue almost. Forget about the legal issue. It might cause mistrust of your entire system, demotivation, That's never a good thing. So validity in its simplicity is, look, it's simple. Did what you do work or not? Yes or no, okay? Or by how much? Now, if you can achieve validity over a period of time, let's say I've been giving an employment test for quite some time, a few years, and each time my results do match up with an increase in performance, then I've achieved reliability. Because if you just did it once, maybe it was a fluke. Maybe there's some other reason that might have happened. Who knows? Maybe it was a really good batch of graduates. But if you achieve the same results over a period of time, and there's a statistic way of measuring this, I get it. Let's not go there. You could if you want. Or, not over time, but let's say you achieved reliability or validity, sorry. Let's say you achieved validity with a lot of people at the same time. 90% of the people I tested this month for the same type of job, 90% of their performance actually improved. Well, that's reliability, isn't it? Gives you some confidence, some good feeling that what you just did actually has merit. It's bona fide, it worked. Okay, you can measure it if you like. So in its simplicity, that's what reliability and validity means. Now I want you to, sorry, I didn't say this before, but I want you to remember, part of this course is for me to teach you what you're going to be facing in reality in the job. Quite often when you go into recruitment selection, people who've already done it tell you this is the way we're doing it. And it's your job to become good at it, find nuances, that little speciality. Like I said, find better sources of candidates, learn how to do social media. I get that. So I'm teaching that to you. That's not a problem. But also I'm preparing you to write certification exams like the HRPA exam, the NKE, I think they call it. So quite a bit of stuff will appear on that. Now, if you're going through the textbook as well, you notice there's a lot of stuff. There is. Read it. It's good. If you want to specialize in this area, definitely read it page to page, cover to cover. But I'm giving you all the good stuff in these sessions, right? And there's more detailed in my notes, just to remind you. Now, what can you validate? What do you check the validity of? Well, I mean, in our business setting, scores on a test. Right down to the questions themselves. Were the questions valid? Were they current? Were they relevant? Effectiveness of recruitment sources. And what that means is, if you are getting candidates, let's say you're hiring accounting people, right? Accounting associates. And you are recruiting at a number of schools. They all have a CPA. But, you know, some come from Waterloo, some come from U of T, some come from Western, I don't know. And a few colleges. And if you keep data on the number of people coming from different places, and then how many of them actually made it to the next level of the recruitment selection process, and how many were hired, and how many stayed or how many you fired, you can validate actually, if you think about it. And I'm thinking pivots here, right? Pivots really help here. You can validate that, hey, you know, graduates from Waterloo tend to have the highest scores or the highest ratings from managers, and also they're the ones who stick around and perform the best. And that almost is to suggest, go to Waterloo, snatch those people up first. I'm not being biased in any way. I'm not a Waterloo guy. I'm a U of T guy. Now, as a manager, I could say only hire from U of T without any merit. We didn't do any measurements. That would be a bias. I'm a U of T guy. We only hire from U of T. If you ever watch that show called Suits, right? The law firm in Suits, what do? They only hire from Harvard. Is it legal? Is it illegal? No, it's not illegal. It's a business practice. It's fine. It might not serve your purposes later on, but hey, you can do it. So candidate success is the ultimate. How well can they actually do it? And remember, my job is not just to hire somebody. That would be like not right. I want to hire the best person I can possibly get who's going to perform the best. Now, when we talk about validity, there are different types of validity. I don't know if you know this. And whether you memorize each one of these after you do your CHRP test or NKE, it doesn't matter. Right? Look, first type of validity is content validity. Whatever it is that you are measuring is a content specific to the outcomes, right? Like if you're going to give a test to people in Excel, like the government, right? The Ontario government universally gives an Excel test. It's called an employment test. I've seen it. By the way, if you took my other class, you can do that test with your hands tied behind your back and one of your eyes closed. But it doesn't matter. Not everybody can. But if you give an Excel test for jobs that aren't actually going to be using it, then it really doesn't have content validity. The content doesn't match up. If I were to ask you questions in this course about HR planning, that's a different course. That has some merit because recruitment and selection does use HR planning. It's a thing. We're going to get to that in a couple of sessions. If I asked you questions in this course about Excel from the last course, yeah, I could, but I wouldn't start asking you about profit margins and production units, whatever, because it's very little to do with recruitment selection. If I ask you to use Excel to calculate, let's say, selection ratios or yield ratios, the percentage of people that move from one stage to the next in recruitment selection, that would be legitimate. That would be content valid. In fact, tests that don't have content validity could be discriminatory. Human rights. Construct validity. We talked about this. It means if you gave a test, like a GMAT, for example, if you know what a GMAT or an LSAT test is to get into law school, I mean, many of those questions have absolutely nothing to do with law or business for that matter. They're kind of logic. But if you know how to answer some of those questions, like a train was going east at 30 miles an hour, 6 passengers got off, something like that. Google that one if you want. But I can use that as a predictor of how well a person can think in a courtroom, on their feet. How logical are they? Then that has construct validity. Earlier in the other course, I gave you an example of a guy who took a course called underwater basket weaving. That has nothing to do with the guy's job. He's not going to work near water, go underwater, or weave a basket. But I told you it has huge level of construct validity or predictive validity in that if I know a person's able to do that, I could construct other things about the person, that they are a risk taker, they're a leader, they have stamina, physical and mental. I might even say, if I did enough studies, that they have a heightened level of emotional intelligence. Leave that up to the scientists. Right? So go around, look at your family members, people out there, and if you notice something about them, their behavior, that's fine. Judge that behavior if you want for what it is. But ask yourself, if I saw that, if I observed that in a person, what else can I tell about that person? Predictive validity, we talked about that, also called Criterion. It's a Criterion type of validity. That's when, let's say, a score on one test can predict other things about the person. So for example, if I gave a simple math test to a lot of candidates who are going to work in my business office, that's fine. It's not a discriminatory test. It's something I need people to be able to do, grade 8 level math or grade 6 level math. But if I found out that people who scored very high, 90 plus on this test, but also moved into our accounting jobs, they do quite well, then that test actually predicts that these people can actually do well in accounting. That wasn't the job we hired them for. Right? And we want to be careful not to stereotype either. But you can prove that something about a person that I measured for one reason can actually predict other things about them. In fact, the guy who took underwater basket weaving, look, I could go to Cal State University in California and ask them for the contacts of everybody who's taken that course and passed it, underwater basket weaving. And if I were to follow each of those people and interview them and ask them what jobs they do and their promotion ability and the amount of money they make, I could easily find out that anybody who did well in that course tends to take on leadership roles. Many of them move on to the military. A lot of them are in marketing worldwide. I don't know. I'm making that up, obviously. I don't know. But I can predict things. And concurrent validity, another criterion measure, the criteria. Do the scores on a performance measure that you did, performance review, do they correlate with the measure done at the same time? So concurrently at the same time. So if you have a high performance score, and I also gave you an Excel test at the same time, or I tested how quickly you make decisions or how much money you bring in if you're a salesperson, number of complaints you had, then I'm looking at both at the same time and I say, yeah, if one is high, the other one tends to be high as well or low. Okay, read my notes. There's a little bit more details on it. I'm going to tell you right now, probably if you go into recruitment for the rest of your career, you will probably never use the words concurrent validity again. Maybe just an idea in the back of your head. That's okay. Know it for that test, right? I want you to think of some examples of different types of validity. Relate them to your personal experience. What do you validate? Do you validate people? Do you validate a purchase you made? What do you validate? Think about it. Now, that's fine. We validate things. I want to show you a graph in a few minutes. We essentially look to see how much confidence do I have in what just happened. I get it. But along the way, you want to look at some errors as well. And we talked about this in the last class. Errors. It's a luxury. Remember the doctor I told you? Would a doctor ever sit there and say, yep, what I did helped the patient move on? Yeah, of course, they're allowed to do that. Or would they sit back and say, what else could have influenced what just happened? Hopefully they do. I mean, that's what science is all about, being curious and aware, questioning. So next time you do something and you assess what you did to be, hey, this is great, I feel great. Why did it happen to me? Why me? It could be positive and negative. Just sit back and ask yourself, yeah, why me? What did I do to influence what just happened to me? Now you either find out, wait a minute, I just put in the time to sweat equity. I worked hard. That's why it happened to me. Or on the other hand, you could also realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm just a mean person. I made it happen. People hate me because I did something. That's why it happened to me. You're in fact exercising some sort of knowledge of errors or suspects. So it's important. I mean, it's a luxury. I don't think we sit down and write these in a report. This is something at the back of your head that you keep. So of course, in a scientific environment, everything gets tested, everything gets written down. It's okay. In real world cases, we just keep in the back of our head, right? So what are some of these errors? Well, bad instrument. Okay, so this is a revisit of my other course, maybe some other courses you've taken. What if the way you did the test, let's say it was a paper and pencil test, or personality test, or a language test, or an Excel test, or math test, whatever thing you did to measure how good a candidate might be before they go on to the next interview, whatever test that is. What if that wasn't relevant? What if it was inappropriate? Maybe the questions on it were worded in a way that no reasonable person would understand. Maybe you just bought the test, you purchased it, and you thought it was a cookie cutter. Use it for everybody. No, I mean, come on, that's just lazy. A test you would give to accountants, I don't think should be the same test you give to HR people. I don't think so. Does it cost money to develop different versions? Maybe. Is it worth it? Of course it's worth it. So bad instrument is simply the method you used, or the instrument, so to speak, the test. Even if it was a survey, the questions on the survey. And also the timing, of course. When are you doing this? I mean, look, if you find out that everybody you interviewed on Friday afternoon, none of them seemed to work out, but it just happened that all the ones that came on Friday afternoon were all from Seneca, and you conclude that Seneca graduates are no good because they did bad. Their interviews sucked. Sorry, I think I'm allowed to say that. They were bad. Their test results are bad. Come on, like associate it with the time. That's not an instrument. That's just bad timing. I think I have that on the next slide. But another error could be, ask yourself, could it be the interviewer bias? Like you in HR might be the first interviewer, the first person who does that scan, the initial scan. It could be a telephone interview, could be in person, just to see if they're worth moving on to the next level. You're not going to get a manager to do the first interview, I don't think. But are you biased where you just want to get somebody in quickly and you say, okay, that guy's okay, I'll let it go? Well, it's not your decision to let something go. It has to be policy. Maybe that guy could have been the best person ever. That person, right? Are you biased yourself? It could be that you, as the initial interviewer, have prejudice. You're elite. If you can't do what I can do, you're no good. Similar to me. Recency. If I don't see something you've done recently, no good. It's old. How do you know it's old? Maybe an engineer who learned a skill in the 1980s, you can't discount that. Maybe they had upgrading. Maybe they're just better at it. Maybe the stuff we taught in the 1980s was superior anyways. I don't know. But you can't be biased. And we're going to talk about that later. Different types of biases. Very important. But then that's you. You should know better in HR. But imagine the actual managers. So if you're hiring an engineer, it's a head of engineer, the director of engineering, or what do we call it? Research and development. Has that person been trained? I mean, managers always think, I'm a good judge of people I can hire. Yeah, they might be. I get it. But we need a formal structure in HR. Things need to be done consistently. You can't have different managers looking at people different ways. You lose people that way. You rub people the wrong way. So if your manager themselves, again, if they're guilty of similar to me, I can do it, you should be able to do it, or I don't want you. Well, that's not right. That's suggesting they could do your job right away. They're only looking at recent things, the last things that happened, not an overall history. Again, prejudice, elitism, discrimination, bias. Could be systemic. Could be stereotyping. Look, if you have a manager, let's say an office manager who says, I want to hire receptionists, it could be understood, I suppose. People do that. I'm not going to kid you. People do that all the time. I only want to hire a certain type of a receptionist because they're the front-facing person of our organization. I'm not sure that's a right thing to do. It might be systemic, might be a cultural thing, I suppose. I can tell you story after story of managers. In fact, just, what's today, Tuesday, just last week, I heard a story from a client who says that one of their managers asked, I kid you not, they wanted only a certain type of person, certain type of looking person, and a certain age. And I go, wow, that's just creepy. That's just not right. But I asked myself, wait a minute, is there any merit to it? Like, do they want somebody of a certain age so they can mold them into the position? Is there a certain look? Is it necessary? Like, if it was sales, maybe, I don't know. Like, for example, if you're selling Audi cars, Audi, German auto company, and you say, my salespeople, I prefer somebody who had a European accent, a German accent or German sounding name. I don't know. Like, if you can prove that helps sell cars, I don't know. I'm not sure. Certainly, if you're hiring for an actor in a movie, you can be picky, I suppose. The character, the person has to fit the part, the actor. But managers, you would be surprised. If you assume, they're managers, they should know better, they should be professional. Not true. And I think it's incumbent on HR to educate the managers. And you'll get resistance, I'll tell you that. But there's subtle ways to actually give them. It's a requirement anyways, you have to. And actually a big source of lawsuits right now, employment lawsuits, are because of that manager bias. Inconsistent application we kind of touched on. What if you're treating candidates differently all the time? It's unstructured. Like your interviews are not structured in a way, and you'll get to that in your second half of the course, structured versus unstructured interviews. What if you're doing interviews haphazard for each candidate? Well, that's just not fair. I think every candidate in front of you should have a fair and equitable, level playing ground opportunity. So if you're only asking certain types of questions to one candidate and they look better because of it, and you get tough on another candidate because you learned something new the night before, well, that's not fair. I know at Seneca, when we interview for faculty positions, HR is always in the room. In fact, HR guides the questions. There's about 13 questions. We each take turns writing or asking the question, writing notes down. We can't probe. We can't ask anything different to another candidate than we did before. We can discuss it in private later. But that's very formal, very structured way of doing it. So make sure you consistently apply any activity you do in recruitment or selection. Now, having said that, inconsistent application doesn't have to mean that if you recruit at Seneca College through our career center, that you should also recruit at all other colleges. Unless, of course, somebody goes out and proves that, wait, by only going to Seneca, who only has certain types of students, ethnic-wise, age-wise, we're not sure. That might be discriminatory towards another segment who might only go to Centennial. But that's where employment equity comes in, I suppose. Now, there's a word called systemic. I know you've heard it before. I think you heard it in Comp, your Intro to HR course. There's a bunch of courses you hear it. And this is probably the most dangerous. It's something that's just evolved. It actually exists. It exists in your own mind. It exists in your family. It exists in the country. It exists globally. It's where something has always been done. And it is bias. It's not right. It might be unethical, maybe illegal. But it's just part of the system. It's always been done. It's part of the system. It's systemic. And quite often it is hidden. Now, if your president of your company says, I'm only going to hire or promote, I should say, this type of a person. And I'm going to be careful not to mention. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Because we are doing recruitment. I'm allowed to say it. I will only hire people of a certain faith. Christians and male Christians. Because the owner is old school and feels it's only men who are suitable for this type of job. Not my words. Now, that's just outright. That's not systemic. That's just an outright order from an executive. The thing is, you get away with it year after year because nobody had the guts to say anything about it. And HR told the party line. But sometimes over the years, it becomes a kind of just a part of the culture. So there's a company in the United States called Lobby Hobby. They're like a Michael's. They're like a hobby, arts and crafts type of store. And because of the culture, the vision, the belief system of the owners, the family, they were able to, within their policies and so on, have all of these constructs that said, this is the type of person that works in our organization. This is what we're looking for. And if you look at it on the surface, it doesn't look discriminatory at all, but it could be. But remember, people think it's only relevant if it becomes a problem, right? Yeah, that's not true. It's relevant every single time because you're excluding a whole segment of the population from meaningful employment. So systemic bias, it exists everywhere. I think we all have it too. Just at the back of your head. Something you've grown up with, some mistrust or trust. If you're in high school and you only hung out with, I don't know, your own kind. I'll say that, but I'm not supposed to say that. We're teaching recruitment, so you have to be willing to listen to all of these things. Well, that's systemic. It's not like somebody said we should only hang out with people your own kind. It's just the way you think. When you were younger and you were scared of a certain type of people, that's systemic. You had no rational reason to believe it. That's just the way it was. Look, we had a client. I wrote an article on this, and I can't mention the company. But the article, if you Google it, it's religiously recruiting the best, and it was a software company actually. And it got bought out by this owner. Nice guy. I mean, a really nice guy, family oriented, really good guy. I guess he had some money. And for some reason, and he was educated, so I'm not sure why he thought that during employment interviews, so these are like really highly trained, sophisticated people he's recruiting for, paying really good money. He would, during, I think it would be the second interview, so HR did it, and then the second interview would be his, call him into the office and actually ask them to affirm their, how should I put it, their devotion to the Lord, Jesus Christ. And I'm saying that with all respect. This is true. It's in my article. But I didn't say Christianity at all in my article. That would be controversial. But in fact, that was the truth. That's what he wanted. And a lot of people, they overlooked it. They just said, hey, I'm not Christian, but hey, whatever. They wanted the job. It was a great job, by the way. He left you alone after the fact. But it was almost like a conversion. He wanted to convert. Could be that he just only wanted that type of person. Funny thing is, it wasn't always that way. But he got into a lot of trouble because of it in hindsight. Possibly because after I wrote the article, I'm not sure. But I didn't mention the company. Or somebody in his organization told him, you know what, look, if you really want to get the best people, stop doing that. Stop it. You can ask them about their values, their honesty, their ethics, but not their religion. In fact, HR said, you know what, how many people have you scared away because of that? Now, last bias, environmental bias. It could be an unfair approach to how you recruit, maybe because of distance. So think about not necessarily inside your company, but environmental, outside. Scope it outside. Is it possible that you're only recruiting people from within your vicinity? I mean, the idea is if you live close to my workplace, my factory, my office, you won't be late. And you're only giving chances to people who live near. Well, think about it. Who lives near a factory, right? In an industrial area. Maybe you're disadvantaging a group who would easily and willingly travel from one end of the city to your workplace, and there'll be awesome people to work for. And the distance disadvantage you can create simply by advertising in very local newspapers, or only going to local schools. You're narrowing your talent pool. And I told you in the last session that the larger the talent pool, the better off you are, right? There's talent everywhere. Talent doesn't stop at a border. There could be environmental bias around the interview space itself. I mean, we're talking AODA. It is the law. If you don't know what AODA is, please look it up. So is your interview environment, the access to, is it accessible? If you're doing things via, let's say, web conferencing, is there a digital divide? Are there some people in the society who might not have access to the technology? Think about it. If you're asking people to commute or fly in for an interview, maybe only people with money can actually afford to fly in. People without, really smart people without the money, will say, I can't take that risk. Access to education, transportation, I think you get the idea. So anything related to how people are interviewed or where, or circumstances around it, that would be environmental bias. Probably the easiest one, I think, to figure out. And AODA, by the way, really goes a long way. Now, just take a little pause here. This concept of competencies. So I'm going to bring up competencies later on as well. There's several topics I'm going to talk about, and then we're going to talk about it again. Just bear with me. It's like a meeting at work. You talk about stuff every week. Just sit down and talk about it, right? You learn more. But everything we're talking about, validation and reliability and checking and recruitment selection by nature, its very own nature, what the heck is it? It's all about competencies. And a lot of people, they throw the word around competent or incompetent. They label it. We're going to dig deep. A competency is what exactly you are looking for. It is exact thing you're looking for. And I'm a huge fan of this. A lot of consulting work I've done is about competency mapping. competency systems. You can't figure something out about a person unless you know their competency levels. And we dig deep, we go micro, we go granular on this. These are very distinct elements required to do the job. So if you were to say you need to know how to do accounting, that's very broad. You know, a CPA credential might be a competency, and you can have some assurances, some confidence that if you've earned a CPA, certified professional accountant or public accountant, that association sends you a good person. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Does that mean that all of you who earn a CHRP or CHRL are all going to be awesome HR people? No, it doesn't. I know that test. I've written questions for that test for years. It doesn't. It's a weak test at best. It kind of says that you bothered, you took the time, versus other people who didn't. You took the time to complete that process and you paid the money. So yeah, you look better to me. You have some sort of commitment, dedication to the profession. I get it. But if I measure distinct competencies of what you can actually do and what my job requires you to do, that's the importance. So, I mean, listen, a lot of competencies show up on a job description. I'm not going to bore you with job description. Although later on in another session, we're going to talk about job analysis and competencies again. But when you hire somebody, that somebody is giving you their set of competencies. Think of it as a box. And in the box are individual sheets of paper, little tiny sheets, and they write down absolutely everything they can do. I don't mean like, yes, I can use Excel. I'm talking about within Excel, what are the different things you can do? Look, can I just give you an example? The simplest competency any human has. They can literally say, I know how to breathe. That's a competency. It becomes more important if you're a scuba diver or underwater welder or you're working in confined spaces. But then we can measure that particular competency, your ability to breathe. I could ask you, can you climb ladders? That's a competency. Firefighters need it. Construction people need it. But I mean, what's the ladder? How big? I can climb a ladder too. 3 steps, no problem for me. Ask me to go up a ladder, like 20 steps, forget about it, not happening. So I don't have that particular competency, yet it is very important to the job. So when you go around asking questions, are you okay with ladders? Oh, come on, really? So we're going to get to that later on. I'll give you some homework as well. You referred to competencies in broader terms as knowledge, skills, abilities. And there's this other thing, that other, KSAO. I'm going to add aptitudes in there, and actually attitudes as well. Your attitude towards something, towards work, your work ethic, attitude towards others or customers. That, to me, is a competency. It can be bought, it can be measured, it can be developed. Aptitude is your ability to pick up new skills going forward. We can measure all of this. In fact, your tests like GMATs and LSATs and SATs, if you don't know what these are, you can Google just to figure them out. They're like general tests to get you into grad school, I think. They are called scholastic aptitude tests. They don't measure the job you're going to be doing. They measure your ability, your aptitude towards picking up new ideas, accepting them. I'll give you a story. I was at, I know I shouldn't have done this, but I went to a drive-thru at McDonald's this morning, actually. And it's okay. I ordered. I had no clue you can only buy breakfast in the morning. So I asked for French fries. No, sorry, I asked for McChicken sandwiches. And the girl said, it's breakfast only. And I thought, okay, it's breakfast only. Like, am I supposed to know what the hell that means? Well, okay, I did. It's only breakfast. And by the way, in a drive-thru, you can't really read that board, okay? It's not that. There's pressure. There's people behind you. So then I ordered whatever, and I go, do you have French fries? She goes, it's breakfast. Literally like that. And I go, I literally said, how am I supposed to know that? I go, do you sell hash browns? They're potatoes? And she goes, yes. I go, give me 2 of them. Then I thought, my God, I shouldn't have said that. But I question. This is what I do. I go, she is missing one thing, and it's that attitude for customer service. I hate to tell you, I also profiled that person quickly. Like, who was it? A young person who may be just doing this in the summer. And it was probably a young person doing this in the summer. But didn't have that particular attitude. Could it have been a bad day? Maybe. But we can measure that through customer complaints. And if it's a recurring systemic thing on the part of the employee, of course, then we can correct it. But I think she got yelled at by her boss for saying that. Really, how am I supposed to know that French fries are not a breakfast item? Where I come from, they are. By the way, competency mapping is simply making a list of competencies a person brings to you in great detail, and then matching them up with what are required for a job. Those you could do. It's your job. You should be able to do it. Job analysis, right? Job description, job specification. And the difference between the two is called a skill gap. We talked about that in the last course, the skills inventory. And the gap. So if you had candidates that have a gap between what they have and what you need, that could simply be a structural problem with the labor market. There aren't enough people with that new gap. With that new skill requirement. You can still hire them because they have aptitude. You can build those skills that are in the gap. You can't, though, when it comes to licensing. Government says you need this license. You can't hire the person then. But it's the aptitude that's important because they can pick up that skill. Now, like I said, training development or learning development, that's what they do. They fill those gaps. They produce skills. They develop skills, hone them in. Performance management, PM, that's a whole different, you're learning that in a whole different course. But performance management measures how effectively employees are able to use, not the competencies they bring in. We already bought those. That's what recruitment selection is all about. But then on the job, how effectively can you use those competencies or not use them, lack of? And that, of course, could be the basis for, termination. Or certainly compensation. Or simply to see, hey, wait a minute, people said one thing during an interview. Their resume demonstrates that they have all these competencies. They were able to talk about them during an interview. But guess what? On the job, they couldn't actually do it. That's where the science comes in. We're actually measuring this. And then, of course, that's what we have statutory probationary period. So we can just let you go, hire somebody else. Just make sure that whatever you measure through performance systems, whatever you measure is not discriminatory. It's bona fide, right? You heard of BFOR, BFOQ. It has to be bona fide. Like you can't, on a performance measure, say, well, you don't know how to speak French that well if French has nothing to do with the job. That's why we have job descriptions and job specification sheets. Not all organizations do. But if you did, you would have something formal to use as a benchmark, yes? Now, I'm going to ask you to do this. This is fun. And I'll ask you to do it again in another session. You have a resume, I get it. And you all have a LinkedIn. I hope to God you have a LinkedIn. There are people. You're in semester 2. There are people looking for you right now. Oh yeah. It's called candidate mining in LinkedIn, right? We look for you on LinkedIn. And look, there's an organization out there right now. I just know it. They're looking for a really good person who can be molded, fit into a position called change management in HR. I don't know, something out there. And they're going to mine LinkedIn to see things you've done, academic-wise, personal life, volunteer, whatever. They're looking for that one profile. So when I say profile, that's what I'm looking for, your brand, your package. So why don't you get your LinkedIn going now, please? Let the world know what you've done. But I want you to map out your personal competency. Start with your resume. It's okay. Just do it in a list. Like, I know how to do this, I can do this, I can do this. They can be skills, knowledge, ability, aptitudes, attitudes, whatever. Even do a description of your work ethic. And look, if you're lazy, it's okay, say it. I tend not to like to take on additional work. That's okay. If you're a go-getter, likes to take on everything, say it. You're going to reflect on it. Then you're going to categorize these competencies. What are they? Start broad. Hard skills, soft skills. Hard skills would be like math skills or computer skills, Excel, a language. Soft skills will be more like your motivation, I guess. How motivated are you? That'll be a skill. I don't know. I think so. But soft skills like your attention to detail, your time management skills, your leadership skills, your coordination skills. Write those down. I don't know. I think any one of you, I am confident, I can almost validate this, get it? That on the minimal side, your list should have about 150 things. 100 to 150, how's that? On the high end, I think many of you can push 200-300 things. Go minute, go detailed. The work we did in Excel alone could be split into at least 15, 20 different things. Now, find that dream job, whatever it is you want. I don't know if you know. I know you want to be in HR. Find a generalist description. You want to be in training, you want to be in health and safety or comp benefits. Plenty of job descriptions out there you can download. And then write those things down, what they're looking for. Read between the lines, okay? And then find the gap. And when you find that gap, hey, wait, they need this, I don't have this. Ask yourself, how do I get there? And I'm a big fan of free stuff. Quite often you can get there free. That's what my little pathways do. So as an example, if you want to work in benefits, a benefits specialist, you're taking a course, one course called Comp. And a lot of it you're going to know. Look at the job description. Say you should know this, you should know that. One of the things it says you should have an idea of group pension plans, GPPs. Well, email me. I'll tell you where to find that for free. You can just read it, become good, have enough talking points around it. One of them says you need a CEBS, Certified Employee Benefits Specialist. Oh my God, Seneca didn't give that to me. Where do I buy one? You don't. You develop it. It's a certification. I'll tell you how to get it. And a few other small things. They say you should know about quality of work-life initiatives, sustainable benefits. You don't know, but that's a gap you have. And quite often it's free to get that knowledge. Okay? And by the way, don't forget those things you know, those things you can do. Go back to an early age. Underwater basket weaving. And ask yourself, how can other people construct my knowledge of that and believe other things about me? Or how could they predict other things about me? Right? Think about it. Look, we have a student in the group who, I believe, they run some sort of a swimming school. And you know what? If I were to look at that, and it shows up on their LinkedIn, by the way. Yes, I do look at your LinkedIn profiles if you spoke with me more than once. And I look at that from a point of view of, okay, so what does it take to do that? They obviously know how to swim, I hope. And then how to run that. And then I look at the clients, probably children. And there's a staff, a certain type of staff. So figure that out for yourself. What are these hidden things you have? And how could you work them to your advantage? Might need some wordsmithing, I suppose. Now, let's get into nitty-gritty. Going back to reliability and validity, okay? Look, take a look at this chart. It's not overcomplicated, okay? We have 20 new employees. We might have gotten 500 resumes. We broke it down to maybe 100. We interviewed 50. And we hired 20. So we gave these people, before we hired them, we gave them T1. And that was simply a test. It was an employment test. And it was out of, let's say, 30 or 25. I'm not sure what it's out of. Doesn't matter. And we wrote down their scores. Now remember, I gave this employment test to my employees. And let's say it was one of those, let's say it was an Excel test, okay? It was the kind of job that needed Excel. Now, I developed that test to be content valid, meaning it had something to do with the job, and generic enough so it's not discriminatory. And I would suggest and suppose that people who did well on that test will do well on the job. Well, yeah, duh. If you can drive your truck well, I think you're going to be a good truck driver, I would think. So we make sure the test is valid itself. And I'll give you a real side note. There was a company, it was about 3 years ago, and I knew the person in HR through my network. And they posted this job through my society. I have a supply chain global logistics society. And I won't tell you, but it was a consumer goods kind of retail store, like a whole chain across Canada. And I sent, just as a courtesy to this person that I kind of knew by name, I sent 5 people from my supply chain graduate program, logistics program. And 3 of them were my top students. Were the kinds I'd pick up the phone and say, you got to hire this person. But I sent 5 anyways. And they all did an employment test. It was a great job, by the way. And out of that, 2 of them, not everybody gets back to you about feedback, nor did I necessarily want it, but I got it. 2 of the top people, I mean, we're talking you would hire them on the spot. 2 of them actually emailed and said, Ash, listen, I don't know about this. I did that Excel test. And they knew Excel. My God, they knew backwards and forwards. They knew it. But they said, there's just some stuff on it we couldn't get. What's the matter? So luckily, one gave me some verbal feedback on what it looked like, the test. The other one actually wrote down some of the questions. You're not supposed to do that. I get it. Although there's no non-disclosure on that. But they described in great detail what the questions would be. And it was designed by an accounting person, a finance person. Present value and stuff like that. Who the hell cares? It has nothing to do with this job. So I actually, as a courtesy, emailed my contact, who I didn't really know. I kind of knew as part of my society, but there's 5,000 people on it. And I said, look, I'm going to give you some feedback. These are 2 of my best people, probably the 2 best people in Ontario right now you can hire. And I said, look, this is what I found out about the test. We'll keep this confidential. I go, I will for free design a test, an Excel test, not too long, just perfect, completely valid for this type of a job, logistics coordinator. And she said, no, my hands are tied. Our finance people designed it. We've always used it. It's working well. No, thank you. I go, my God, it's free, right? And I said, okay, whatever. Here's the thing, sad or not, that company just lost the confidence of 2 people that were about to graduate, who they could have hired, that could have turned that company's logistics problems around. They lost good candidates all because of the invalidity of a certain type of a test. Okay, side story, go back here. T1, let's say, was an Excel test we gave, and T2 was simply another type of a test. Let's say a paper and pencil language communication test. Could be a typing test. We're going to cover tests in another section. But just 2 different tests we gave, and we kept the scores. But then after we hired the person, let's say 2 months in, and if it was a kind of job where 2 months in, you feel the employee will settle down, they're able to prove how well they can do their job, and you manage to catch various aspects of their job and their performance, we did a performance review. That's your PM. So T1, T2 was before we hired them. PM was within the first 2 or 3 months we assessed their performance. And at the same time we measured P2. And P2 was simply another type of performance score. So performance management could be something that HR does. You interview managers, subordinates, peers, customers. And P2 could be, let's say, we looked at the number of units you produced, the number of rejects you had, number of sales you made, whatever. I want to see if there's validation between the tests and the actual performance. I mean, it's a lot of numbers. I don't expect you to look at this in your head. But look at ID number 1. That's the first person. Scored reasonably high. In fact, the 3rd highest in test 1. And they scored not so well on their performance review and roughly average in P2. So that would be a false negative. No, sorry, false positive. Meaning that our test scores are reasonably high. So our validation was positive. Yes, they will do well, but they didn't actually do well. False negative would be the opposite. They didn't do well on the test, like this person here, 7, but we saw something in them. We gave them a job anyways. But look at this. Their performance scores and their P2 test scores are also low. That was not a false negative. That was just, well, it was actually a positive predictor. But what if you gave a test, the score was low, like candidate number 16, but on the job they did reasonably well. And for whatever reason you gave them the job, there was some charisma, some communication ability that was good. That could be a false negative. Now I'm going to show you how to plot this, okay? There we go. It would look something like this. At the bottom we've got test 2 score, and over here you've got the performance measure. So we're going to look at the second test score we did versus the actual performance. And you would think that the higher the test score, let's say somebody got a 30 out of 30, the higher the performance. And in fact, the trend goes in that direction. Not every person we hired was validated here. Some people here didn't do well. They didn't do well on performance. They scored high. Maybe they lied, they faked it, we don't know. But overall, the trend is that the higher your test score, the higher your performance measure. You know, if I go to my doctor for something related to diabetes, and the doctor looked at 1,000 patients and they said the less sugar you eat, the less of whatever it is they measure you have, your blood sugar level. I mean, we can assume, sure, we can stereotype and say that's got to be true. That's not necessarily true, by the way, because you don't know all the foods that have sugar in it. Inversely, the doctor finds out, wait, there are people who eat a lot of sugar and their blood sugar level stays the same. It's their metabolism, isn't it? I'm going to go into Excel and show you how to actually do this, okay? The rest you can just kind of play with. And just as a caveat, a warning. In HR, we don't actually sit and do graphs every day like this. This is just something you know how to do. Visually, it's great. Quite often, we just look at the results and say, yeah, there is a correlation, a connection between the two. But how much? You can't just say, yeah, things went up if this goes up. By how much? Let me switch over to Excel, okay? So take a look. The same data we had here, different candidates, the test 1, test 2, and the 2 different performance measures. I want to do a graph that looks like this. Okay? Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to move this off to the side. I'm going to, let's do T1 versus PM, okay? I'm going to highlight all of this, and then I'm going to press Control and highlight all of this. I might have said not to do that, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to click Insert at the top, click this type of chart, and use the first one. Okay? I'm just going to make this bigger, just for now. Now, if you go to Design, on your left side you see Quick Layout. Just pick the one that has titles on it. Okay? I like Layout 3. See, it does already a regression or a trend line for me. I'll show you how to do that manually as well. I'm going to do this because it gives me the titles. In fact, I could put my titles here and here. So this is performance. That is score, T1. Now, if you didn't have a trend line, you can right-click on the dot, go to Add Trend Line, and just pick the first, the choice it gives you, the linear. That's fine, okay? Do you see the trend that the higher the score, the higher the performance? Let me move this back up. I put proper titles here. Yes. In fact, if the line was flat and there's a very, very insignificant, very small incline, the slope, I think you call it, you measure that if you want. Go science if you want. Just look at this. If there's a very little flat correlation between the two, I might not have confidence that the test I'm using is actually a good predictor of performance. And I'll question the errors. Remember, maybe the performance measure was not good. Maybe it was bad. But here, I have a pretty good level of confidence that the higher the test score, the higher the performance measure. In fact, you can measure that. You can do a percentage difference. But there's a better number you can use, and it's called a correlation coefficient. Say that 10 times fast. But you're trying to test through a number what the correlation is between test score and performance measure. Let me just delete this for now. I'll give you this file, by the way. You can download it. But take a look. A correlation coefficient is calculated by using a function in Excel called equals CORREL. And inside the brackets, I'm going to highlight the first set of numbers I looked at. In this case, it's T2. And the second set of numbers, which is performance management. So I'm just going to do T1, okay, instead of T2. There we go. Press enter, and it gives you a coefficient of 0.69. I mean, the scale, just to let you know, you can almost guess it's 0 to 1, right? Take a look. I'm giving you this little chart. It's for benchmarking. By the way, I want you to look at this spreadsheet. I'll give it to you. There's a couple of other ways to look at it. But I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. Where the heck? Hang on. Sorry. Let me go back. There we go. There's a chart. This comes from your textbook, by the way, and it's credible because it's from the U.S. Department of Labor. Somebody's done studies, I guess, of hundreds of thousands of millions of different tests. And they found out that if your validity coefficient, the thing we just calculated, is above 0.35, it is very beneficial. It means that the relation between the test you gave and its prediction of performance, its value, is very good. We achieved a coefficient of 0.69. That's darn good. 0.21 to 0.35, it's, yeah, maybe it's useful, I guess. And then below that, you really have to question. You have to revisit the test you gave. Test it for criterion, content validity. Or maybe the performance measure itself. Maybe you're testing on one type of thing, and you hire people, and then your performance measures kind of look at something totally different. Maybe. Now let's look at it from a very simple point of view, right? Let's take a look. These numbers you can digest. These are 20 people I hired. This is a test I gave to all my people on a scale of 1 to 100. And I kind of know that I'm looking for a minimum score of, let's say, 70. So anybody less than 70 on this particular test I gave, I'm not even going to look at. Because over the years and over hundreds of candidates, I found that a good test score on this particular test means that they're going to do well on the job, reasonably speaking. I mean, I get that there are people who take tests very well, but when they actually have to do the job and apply what they know, it doesn't work out so well. There's other tests we can do for that. But take a look. Candidate 1 had a score of 89, pretty darn good. 90, let's say. But then a few months later, when we assessed their performance, they scored very high, 93. This person here had a 72. We hired them anyways, and their performance score was about the same, just a slight bit of an uptick. This one goes slightly low, and so on. You get the idea. Just looking at the numbers in their raw kind of sort of way, without doing charts and calculations, I'd say, yeah, it works. My employment test is a good predictor of performance in the future. And not too far in the future. People do change. Now, you can further to this look at averages. You can look at the average of this and average of that. It's 82.8 versus 84. That's pretty good. It's only a 1.4% difference. That's statistically insignificant. And I measured both of these together, the employment test versus performance on a chart, and you find it pretty much in line. One goes up, the other one goes up. I can use median. If my median performance score were 81 and then my test scores were 82.5, that's pretty good. It's very close. And over time, if I find that it stays around 80, 83, 84, my median, I can prove that time after time, the correlation exists. I validated it with reliability. And then, of course, I showed you the CORREL function. Okay? So when you read my notes, you're going to get more detail about everything we just talked about. Remember, these sessions are just to put things in your head, get you excited about the topic, and of course prepare you for the HRPA exam. We talked about false negative, false positives. I mean, now we're getting kind of way out there in some territory where I'm not sure people in HR we actually test these. But you could, listen, if you found out that a lot of people who scored low on an employment test, and for some reason you ended up hiring them anyways, and to test it, you might just give people a certain test and then ignore the results for the hiring decision, and then look at their performance. Well, if they were low on the employment tests, that would be a negative. But they did very well on performance after the fact. So either your test was broken, it was no good, but we call that a false negative. And a false positive was, oh my God, they did very well on the employment test, but when I hired them, they knew nothing. But you can prove that. You can test that as well. Again, most HRs don't, but it's concepts that you need to know. Now, a few food for thought questions like we do every session. I want you to think about these. When should you use content, construct, or criterion-related validation strategies? I mean, every time. Especially if you have jobs where what it is you're looking for during an interview is directly related to what they're going to be doing on the job. So, for example, a machine operator. Content is very important. Right? You're going to do the job. The questions I'm going to ask you, that's exactly what you're going to do. But when you get into more organic type of jobs, maybe management, higher level, more creative jobs, you can't always know the content of what they're going to be doing later on. Maybe in very broad terms, but it's more construct, more predictive. Let me ask you things and test you on things during the recruitment selection process that allow me to foresee what you're capable of doing in the future. So for interviews when we hire faculty at Seneca, and it's across the board, we don't get too much into the actual content. Like we don't say, can you explain what a T balance sheet is? I don't even know what that is. But what's a balance sheet and an income statement in accounting? We can figure that out some other way. But we ask them questions, hypothetical, situational, like if a student did this, then what would your reaction be? Or how would you handle mental health issues? Or how would you deal with the boss or a team? Right? What is your perception of fairness? I'm going to leave this with you. Actually, I'm very much interested. It's one of the things I'm studying right now. Is where do people's idea of fairness, their tolerance of fairness, where do they get it from? Like, I mean, I like to think of myself as a very fair guy. Maybe some people don't. Or maybe people confuse the idea that somebody was unfair, but they don't see why they took that particular action that didn't look fair. So, for example, if I gave you 5 optional things to do in my class and you failed my class by 4%, there's no way I could give you 4% for free. Nor do I feel comfortable passing you at a squeaky 50%. You know my opinion on that. You might say I'm unfair. I'm biased. Even discriminatory. You'll start making stuff up. When you get desperate, people do that. Anxiety causes people to do weird things. But if you question my fairness without looking at the nature of why I did what I did, then your perception of fairness is maybe not where it needs to be. That's just an example. What if your doctor prescribed you certain types of medicine, but you knew your friend for the same thing, you got different kind of medication? You might say it's unfair. How come that guy got the better meds and I got this? Well, go to med school and you might find out. You have to believe that your doctor didn't prescribe you a certain type of meds because he's getting or she's getting some sort of kickbacks from the drug company. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think so. But if you're going to investigate that maybe your health conditions, your history deserves that treatment, whereas your friend was different, then, well, there's your perception of fairness, you see? It's sound. And by the way, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence later as well. But I want you to ask yourself, where do I get my fair from? There's a benchmark. You're either at it, you're above it, below it. Was it fair or not? Were you treated fairly? Were you harmed in any way? Well, yeah, we're going to talk about harm later as well. Do you have that constant feeling of everybody's out to get me? Well, that wasn't fair. And we use the word equitable as well. Well, of course, quite often people don't get treated fair at all. But many times it's people's perception of what's fair or not that really affects your actions. And we've created policies for HR that if you look at it saying, yeah, it's a no-brainer, but you create certain policies to maintain fairness because of how other people think about it. And when you're a rookie in HR, quite often you shake your head saying, why are we doing this? Well, you need to know a little bit more of the background. You'll learn, you'll get there. But right now, just ask yourself, where do you get your sense of fairness from? Are we fair? Are you fair? I'll give you an example. And you think here, perfect example. We can be divided on this, okay? And this is actually current. There's things going around, COVID. And you see on the news, listen, where I'm coming from a science point of view, I think that way, I'm objective, that people should isolate. They should social distance, I think the word is, right? Yeah, it is. Isolate. But then people feel harmed. In the U.S., you're seeing this all the time. Michigan, there were guys with guns at the state legislature, the government house. And they're having signs. And they're not social distancing because they're in crowds. And they say, it's not fair. We should open up the economy. I'm losing money. I can't go shopping anymore. I can't eat at a fast food restaurant. And I look at that. And I like to label and call them idiots, whatever. I'm not going to. Until I realize, wait, it's not fair what they're doing. Because by what they're doing, they're making a conscious decision to possibly harm somebody else. Got it? So my perception of fairness just changed depending on how I see the facts. Now, they obviously say, well, you're a schmuck. You stay at home. But my rights are more important. Well, your rights or your health, right? So where's the fairness? Where's the balance? I'll let you think about it. This could be a hot topic. Maybe in the very last session we'll do our rant. And we'll talk about fairness. Come up with your stories, will you? I'm going to put you on the air on that one. So, okay, in the next session, we're going to be looking at the legal influences on talent management. Now, you've taken employment law. I don't want to spend too much time. I'm not a lawyer. But at least I'll give you some framework, just kind of revisit, think about it. It's chock full of legalities, I think. And you'll be surprised at things that aren't legal or illegal, but maybe just aren't right, the ethics of it. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence. We're going to start it. We're going to keep talking about it. We'll get into more detail of what bias, discrimination, and prejudice and stereotypes. And we're going to talk about conscious versus subconscious bias. Not unconscious. That's not that. It's conscious or subconscious. You might have heard about this. You might want to know more. I'll give you more. Actually, I think subconscious is one word. Let me fix it right in front of you. Yeah, we're good. I don't know. That's weird. So that's what you're going to look forward to. Now, just remember, because of the textbook and the way the course has always been taught, we're not getting into recruitment and selection right away. We got to cover off this stuff. I think we have today, next session, then we get right into it. And in the second half, remember, you're going to cover off things textbook-wise, but that's where your big assignment comes in. You're going to love it. It's really good. I think the law clerk students that you're going to be interviewing are all charged up. They're motivated to meet you. And we're going to set that up for you nicely in this distance environment. I think you'll do very well with it. So please read my notes. Go through the textbook. Look at the couple of articles that I've posted in my notes. And light up the discussion board with any thoughts you might have. Okay? See you next session.